Hello, thanks so much for joining tonight. We're going to get started in just a minute. We're going to let people have a chance to log on, and then we're going to jump into tonight's webinar. Hi, everyone. We're going to give it just maybe just one more minute before we jump into tonight's program. But thank you all so much for joining. All right, we'll go ahead and jump right in. Good evening, everyone, and for everyone on the West Coast, good afternoon. Welcome to our webinar on accessing President Biden's student debt cancellation program. We're really excited to go ahead and get jumping into today's program. I'm Kat Welbeck, Advocacy Director and Civil Rights Counsel at the Student Borrower Protection Center. And today we're going to walk through President Biden's cancellation program and the application process, and also a couple other programs that might help you access student debt relief. Today, I'm really gladly joined by my colleague, Amy, who's on the line as well. And while she's in the background, she's going to be compiling your questions as we go through tonight's program. So feel free to drop questions in the Q&A function, and then we'll go through those at the end of today's webinar. And just a little bit of background on who we are at the Student Borrower Protection Center. We're a national nonprofit organization, and we're solely focused on alleviating the burden of student debt. So we engage in a mix of advocacy, policymaking, and litigation strategy, all aimed at reining in industry abuses, protecting borrowers' rights, and advancing economic opportunity for the next generation of student loan borrowers. We're really excited to jump in. Again, one more time, feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A throughout the chat, and we'll save those for the end of today's program. Okay, and as I mentioned up top, for the majority of this program, we're going to spend our time talking about the cancellation program and the application. But towards the end, we're going to very briefly go over ways that people who, particularly people who work in public service, can get access to additional relief. So if you're someone who works, for example, for a nonprofit, you work for a federal, local, state government, if you work in emergency services, you're a first responder, we're going to talk about ways that there might be other opportunities to access relief towards the end of today's program. Okay, so let's jump into the student debt application and why we're here. So this past August, in recognition of the harmful economic impacts of the student debt crisis, President Biden announced a broad-based student debt relief plan for federal student loan borrowers who meet certain income criteria. And so what this plan does, it provides up to $20,000 in debt cancellation for student loan borrowers who previously received a Pell Grant to attend college and also meet the income requirements. One thing that's really important to note about this Pell requirement, you only had to receive a Pell Grant at any point in your education. It didn't have to be used for all of your education. If you got a Pell Grant for one semester, if you got a Pell Grant for 2 semesters or 2 years of school, it doesn't matter as long as you got a Pell Grant at any point in time during your education. Also, the plan will cancel $10,000 for borrowers who did not receive a Pell Grant, but also meet certain income requirements. And what are those income requirements? To be eligible, student loan borrowers have to earn less than $125,000 as an individual or $250,000 a year as a married couple or head of households in either the 2020 or 2021 tax year. For the vast majority of people who are going to apply for this program, it will require an application that is available online at studentaid.gov/debt relief/apply. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But For some borrowers who have already shared their income information with the Department of Education through enrollment in an income-driven repayment plan, you might be eligible for cancellation automatically. And you should be getting an email from the Department of Education if that applies to you. But even if you qualify for that, you can still go ahead and submit the application. One more thing you likely heard at the time this announcement was made is that the student loan payment pause was extended through December 31st of 2022. So you should not expect to make payments on your federal student loans through the end of this year. And then also President Biden announced that there's going to be a new income-driven repayment plan that offers more affordable payments. One thing to note, though, for the income-driven repayment plan, that's a proposal, and so it still has to go through the rulemaking process in the Department of Education. So that plan will likely not be available at the beginning of 2023 when payments resume, but it's an announcement to know that future changes are coming to this program. Okay, so what do we need to do to apply? Again, the application is available at studentaid.gov/debt-relief/apply. And that's where you're going to go to submit your application. Just one thing to really note before we get into a few more details about the application. It's very short. It takes less than 5 minutes. It can be done on a mobile device, and also the application is available in both English and Spanish. One thing to note, again, the application is live now. The Department of Education will be accepting applications through December 31st of 2023. So you have a bit of time to apply, but we really encourage you to apply early and as soon as possible. One thing especially, we're encouraging borrowers to apply by mid-November in order to give enough time for the Department of Education to process relief before payments are expected to resume in January of 2023. Okay, so what is actually part of this application process? So not only is this application quick, it's pretty easy to complete. So we also want you to know the things that you would need for this application, and they are here on the screen. So your first, middle, and last name, your social security number, your date of birth, your contact information, and self-verification of your income information. So you actually don't even have to log in to your studentaid.gov account. You can actually do all of this directly through the application link. One thing that's really important to note that we have bolded on this page, please confirm that your adjusted gross income from either 2020 or 2021 meets those income requirements. So again, that is $125,000 per year for an individual and $250,000 per year for a married couple or a head of household. And the reason why this is really important, and we're going to see on the next page when we have a clip of the application, you're going to be certifying and attesting to the validity of your income certification. So please make sure that it's truthful so you don't face any possible penalties. So ways to check your AGI, whether it's going through your tax information from 2020 or 2021, just to make sure that that income is correct. And then also one really important thing to note, and it's a question we get a lot, and that's why I made sure to say here, it's based on your adjusted gross income. Sometimes people say, well, my salary is right at the cutoff. If my salary is at 125,000 or my salary might be 130, can I still make it? It depends. It depends on what your tax filing is, because again, it's not based on your salary for the year. It's based on your taxable income. So it's going to be based on your adjusted gross income for your tax filing year. So just a really important thing to note about that number. So please confirm before you apply. All right, and then what does the application look like? So this is actually a screen grab of what the application is. So very quick. So again, filling in those data fields that we just went through on the last slide. And then also, again, going back through, reviewing that you meet the criteria for the program, attesting to that, signing your name, and then you press submit. And so what happens next? So what happens once you submit? So after you reply, you're going to receive a confirmation email from the Department of Education. And so what they'll process your application and verify your information. So just in case they need to verify additional information, just make sure you're checking your inbox and respond as quickly as possible if you get any follow-up information from the Department of Education. If you don't hear anything back, there's nothing else you need to do other than just wait. Once your application is processed, you'll be notified by the Department of Education, who will then notify servicers. We're still waiting. The department has not yet begun to cancel the debts, but this is what the process is going to be. This is what the process is going to look like. One really important thing that I do want to note, and again, I know we keep saying go to studentaid.gov and talking about where to access this information. We really want you to beware of scams, because we know, scams are nothing new, but particularly because this is a new program and there are a lot of people who are going to be filling out applications, we know that there might be a time where people might try to take advantage of people trying to get more information about this program. One thing to note, you don't have to pay to get access to this debt relief. So that's also one quick way to know that it might be a scam. If someone's saying that you have to pay to access this student debt cancellation, that is not true. Again, this application is available at studentaid.gov /debt relief /apply. So you can access this on your own, and you should not have to pay to access this debt relief. Okay. Also, let's talk about the loans that are eligible for broad-based cancellation. So I know I said federal loans, but what does that mean? So again, as we stated at the top, student loan borrowers must earn below a certain income and must have qualifying federal loans held by the Department of Education in order to be eligible for this relief. And so those loans include all federal direct loans. And so these are subsidized, unsubsidized federal loans, Parent Plus loans. These are, and so in Parent Plus, those are loans that parents take out to support their children to go to attend college if we're not sure what type of loan it is. Grad Plus loans. So those are loans that are taken out for graduate education, and direct consolidation loans. So those are all federal direct loans that apply for this program. Other loans that are held by the federal government, specifically FEL loans, so loans that are federal family education loans that are held by the Department of Education, and Perkins loans held by the Department of Education apply. Additional loans that are included, defaulted loans that are held by the Department of Education, including defaulted subsidized Stafford and unsubsidized Stafford loans, defaulted Parent Plus or Grad Plus loans, and defaulted Ed held Perkins loans. So these loans all qualify. One really helpful tip, because I know I just ran through a long list of loans, and sometimes it's really confusing. People say, I don't know what type of loan I have. I just know I have federal student loans, or people know who their student loan servicer is. One helpful tip to determine whether or not your loans qualify for this program: if you had loans that were paused during the course of the payment pause over the pandemic, so the loans that have been paused since March 2020, that will be paused through the end of this year, those loans are eligible for this cancellation program. One note though, as you can see from this red text at the bottom, as of September 29th, the administration announced that any privately held or privately owned FEL loans, so those federal family education loans, or Perkins loans that are not held by the Department of Education are not eligible for relief under this broad-based cancellation program. So anyone who consolidated their commercial FEL or their Perkins loans prior to September 29th, totally fine. But any new consolidations of these FEL and Perkins loans that are not currently owned by the Department of Education are not eligible. And so I know this is a bit confusing. And so some of you might be thinking, how do I tell what type of loans I have to begin with? And we're going to talk a little bit about how to figure that out. And so one thing that you're able to do, so we talked about, you go to studentaid.gov to be able to access this application, but you can also go to studentaid.gov to learn about your different loan types. So what you'll do, you'll log into studentaid.gov. And again, I know many of us have not logged into studentaid.gov in a very long time. It's okay. You can go ahead and reset your password, but you'll need a login to log into your account. And when you log into your account, you can actually go to, there's going to be a dashboard, but and also a place where you can look at managed loan sections, where you can look at the type of loans that you have. And as you can see here, this is a screenshot from Federal Student Aid. You can actually see the different type of loans that you have. So for example, all direct loans qualify. So if you see direct loan, like this first loan at the top, that is a type of loan that qualifies. Or if you're trying to figure out, you said, I know I have FEL loans in this federal family education loan program, but I don't know if they're held by the Department of Education or if they're these private commercially held FEL loans. FEL loans that are held by the federal government will have Department of Education, as you can see at the bottom of the screen, you'll see the Department of Education and your student loan servicer. And again, a reminder, if the Department of Education owns your FFEL loans, you've been able to benefit from the payment pause. If you had commercially held FFEL loans and loans that are not able to benefit from this program, those are held by private lenders. You'll see, for example, like a bank or a private lender, like you see here, Wells Fargo, to make that difference. Also, another tip, commercially held FFEL loans were federal loans that were not able to benefit from the payment pause. So that's always a quick tip we kind of give people to figure out, which type of loan do I have? And then one thing to note, again, this can be deeply confusing, especially for people who have FFEL loans. We're hosting a separate webinar on November 3rd to talk more about what FFEL borrowers can do and what programs they can benefit for relief. And so if that applies to you, we'll be sure to include that in the follow-up materials, and we're going to talk about it again a little bit later in the webinar. Okay, so really quickly, just one more overview of the cancellation program. One thing amazing about this this announcement is historic in nature, and the fact that there is broad-based debt relief for student loan borrowers. We expect more than 20 million people to see their loans completely canceled with either the 10K or the 20K based on Pell status. And again, a reminder, based on the income, if you meet the income requirements, you're either eligible for $10,000 in cancellation or up to $20,000 in cancellation if you receive a Pell Grant at any point in your education. The income requirements are $125,000 per year for an individual and $250,000 per year for a married couple or the head of household. And that is based on your 2020 or your 2021 taxable income. So really important to note, if, for example, if your income changed a bit between 2020 or 2021, that's okay. As long as one of those years met that income threshold, you're okay. You can still apply. You must apply. So again, this application is live. Go to studentaid.gov/debt relief/apply. We'll make sure to repeat that throughout, and we'll also send it in the follow-up materials. And then also one thing to note, we're talking about the cancellation program, but we're going to spend a little bit of time in the rest of the program to talk about other programs like public service loan forgiveness, because there might be other opportunities for people to be able to benefit from debt relief outside of this cancellation program. So for example, you can apply both to this cancellation program and you can apply to public service loan forgiveness. So we're going to talk about ways that you can add to the relief that you can possibly benefit from this program. Also beware of scams. You should not have to pay to access this program. Make sure that you're applying through the federal student aid website at studentaid.gov. So I keep saying it. So just so you know, to go to trusted places to receive this information and make sure that you're applying to the right place and not getting bad or false information. Okay, and so what we're briefly going to talk about, we're talking about the cancellation program, but there are also ways that people who work in public service, for example, can get additional relief that is additive to President Biden's cancellation program. So there are other programs that add pathways to debt relief, and we're going to really briefly go through some changes to this program that are only that expire on December 31st. And so we wanted to take this chance to let people know you have about 5 days left, but if this applies to you, there's some steps that you might want to take to benefit from this. So the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, the promise is pretty simple. If you work in public service for 10 years and you make your student loan payments over the course of that time, your debt should be canceled, the remaining balance of your debt after that 10 years. Well, we've seen from the 14 years this program has been in existence, 15 years now, the 15 years this program has been in existence, it really hasn't lived up to that promise. And so when President Biden promised to fix the broken student loan system, one of the first things he did was looking at how do we make sure that our public service loan forgiveness program is working. What are things that we can do to help borrowers who were previously denied access and relief through this program an opportunity to get their debt canceled? So the Department of Education announced a one-year waiver period that began on October 6th of 2021, so last year, that runs through October 31st of this year, that essentially gives public service workers credit towards loan forgiveness, regardless of what type of federal student loan they have, for any period of time since October 1st, 2007, when the program began, as long as they are working in qualifying public service and their loan was not in default, deferment, or forbearance. And the important thing about this, essentially what it does, it helps remove a lot of the administrative burdens that kept people from getting access to this program, from either having the wrong loan type or you being in the wrong repayment plan, being able to get access to this. So for any month, even for months where borrowers did not actively make a payment, as long as the loan was in repayment status, you can receive credit. So we're seeing a lot of people get additional credit towards public service loan forgiveness over this period. So we're going to really briefly walk through steps for people who might work in public service that you'll want to take before October 31st of this year in order to get the added benefits of this waiver. Okay, so typically for public service loan forgiveness, you have to meet 4 specific criteria. In order to get public service loan forgiveness, you have to have a direct loan, you have to be enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan, you have to work in public service, and you have to work full-time, and that's 30 hours a week, or what your employer determines to be full-time if it's more than 30 hours a week, and you have to make 120 qualifying payments. That's the equivalent to 10 years of payments. What this limited waiver does, the last 2 criteria do not change. You still have to have worked in qualifying public service, and you still have to have 120 qualifying payments. What changes about this program is many people, particularly people who had FFEL loans, people who've had Perkins loans, were denied access to this program because they did not have direct loans. And when they consolidated their loans, they lost all past credit that they paid on those FFEL or Perkins loans. So now with this waiver period, regardless of loan type, people can get retroactive credit for payments made. It also removes a lot of the administrative barriers for people who weren't previously enrolled in income-driven repayment plans. So now people who may not have been enrolled in income-driven repayment plan, or for people who have maybe made a payment late one month, maybe made an underpayment one month, can still get credit for this period of time. So again, what this waiver does, it gives credit for any period of time that someone was in repayment status as of October 1st of 2007. And then another really quick thing to note about this program, about this waiver, it's not automatic. And so there are steps that you're going to want to take in order to be able to benefit from this program. And the reason I'm just really noting people, especially people who have FFEL and Perkins loans, there are steps you're going to want to take to be able to benefit from this. And again, we're hosting a webinar on November 3rd to talk about some more specifics for FFEL and Perkins borrowers, but FFEL and Perkins borrowers have to consolidate in order to benefit from the public service loan forgiveness waiver. Also, everyone who wants to access public service loan forgiveness has to submit a public service loan forgiveness form or an employment certification form, previously known as an ECF. So again, this waiver is not automatic, but if you work in public service and you want access to this program, this is one way that you can get relief. Okay, so do you need to take action? It depends. So there are 3 things that you need to know if this is a program that can benefit you. First, do you work in public service? Is your employer a qualified public service employer? Do you work for a nonprofit, a 501c3 nonprofit? Do you work for a federal, state, municipal, tribal government? That's the first. Do you work in qualified public service employment? 2, what type of loans do you have? Do you have direct loans? If you have direct loans, you're fine. You can go ahead and submit your PSLF form and get the credit for your past payments. If you have a FFEL or Perkins loan and you want to benefit for public service loan forgiveness, you would have to consolidate in order to benefit from this program. But one thing to note during this waiver period, so through October 31st of this year, if you want to take advantage of the public service loan forgiveness waiver and you have a FFEL or Perkins loan, if you consolidate, you can receive credit for loan payments made prior to the consolidation, which is something that does not exist under the regular PSLF rules. Finally, the last action that you need to take is submit a PSLF form with the Department of Education. So anyone who's working towards public service loan forgiveness will want to submit an application to the Department of Education, essentially raising their hands and saying, I work in public service, I want to get credit for my payments. Okay. How do you know if your employer is a qualified public service employer? I know I just listed it, but one thing that you could do, again, I'm saying this a lot, you can go to studentaid.gov and there is a PSLF help tool, which can actually walk you through this process. And that's where you can actually enter in your employer's tax employer identification number or their EIN and look up and see if they're a qualified employer. One thing I will note, some people might go and say, I know I work for a 501c3 nonprofit. I know I work for the government, but my employer's not showing up in the PSLF help tool. That's okay. It just likely means that no one from your place of work has likely ever applied for PSLF, so they may not be in the system. But one thing to note, because we're getting close to the end of this waiver period, it ends on October 31st of this year, and you want to make sure that you're in the queue. If you get to the PSLF help tool and for some reason they don't let you enter your employer, and you know for sure you work for a 501c3 nonprofit, you work for a local, state, federal, or tribal government, you can submit a paper form and just make sure that you're getting yourself in the queue for this waiver. Also, what are you going to need to do to take actions? What type of loan do you have? If you have a direct loan or you have already consolidated one of your older loans into a direct loan, a direct consolidation loan, your loan type qualifies for PSLF. If you have anything other than a direct loan, like a FEL or Perkins loan, you have to consolidate to benefit from this program in order to access this waiver. And again, a very important part about this waiver program for public service loan forgiveness is that on October 31st, that is the last day before we go back to different rules. So just noting that there. One thing I really want to make this note about consolidation, because we're talking about two different programs. So at the beginning of this webinar, we were talking about President Biden's cancellation program. And then now we're also talking about the public service loan forgiveness program. For many people, they're able to apply to both. So for people, for example, who have direct loans, you have access to both of these programs, your loan types qualify. But I want to make a note, and I know we talked about it a little bit earlier, but I really want to make a note about consolidation. As of September 29th, student loan borrowers with commercial FEL or Perkins loans held by an institution are no longer eligible for cancellation under the debt relief announcement from August. And so we talked about this at the beginning. All student loan borrowers who consolidated before September 29th don't have to worry about this. So if you previously consolidated your loans with the federal government before September 29th, this does not apply to you. But if you have a mixture of loans that receive the payment pause and some that did not receive the payment pause, consolidating all those loans together could affect your eligibility for the 10K or 20K of cancellation under the recent announcement. And so, as the most recent information that we have, we do have additional resources from our team at our website, forgivemystudentdebt.org. We're going to share that after this webinar, but we want just to make sure that we're giving people this information because based on your loan balance, your loan type, in which programs you qualify for, there may be different benefits to how you want to access different programs. So we want to make sure that we made this note here, but we'll also send information on our website where you can look into more information about this if you have a FEL or Perkins loan and you're not sure what you're supposed to do. So we'll share that information after tonight's webinar. Also, if you have a FEL loan and you want to know more about different options for relief and access to different programs, I want to let you know that we are hosting another webinar on November 3rd, specifically for FEL borrowers, because we know there are some unique circumstances about their access to different programs. So I just wanted to flag there because I know we're talking about how to access public service loan forgiveness if you have FEL or Perkins loans, but just wanted to make this note about consolidation. Okay, lastly, if you want to benefit from public service loan forgiveness, you know you work in public service, you either have a direct loan or you decide to consolidate your FEL or Perkins loans. The last step you need to do is certify your employment with a PSLF form. And so what you're going to do is you'll go to studentaid.gov. Again, this is the federal student aid website where you're going to do a lot of accessing these programs for relief. You will go to the PSLF help tool. that will help you generate a PSLF form, formerly known as an employment certification form. And you can use that PSLF help tool to fill in your PSLF form. You'll want to do that for any employer that is a qualifying public service employer that you've had since October 1st of 2007. Have them sign that form, send it back to you so you can submit that to the Department of Education. So you can submit that to Mohila, the servicer over public service loan forgiveness, by October 31st of this year. Okay, one more reminder, this PSLF waiver, the reason why we want to talk about this is because we have 5 days left in this waiver, but this really is a really huge opportunity for people who work in public service to get additional credit towards debt cancellation. And so I know this is a very brief primer, but we wanted to focus mostly on the President Biden's cancellation program today, but we wanted to give people a little bit of information about other programs that might provide more access to relief. And so we'll send a follow-up materials after today's webinar, and we'll also answer some questions during Q&A. Okay, also, one thing I want to also talk about is income-driven repayment plans and the income-driven repayment plan account adjustment. As a public service loan forgiveness, the income-driven repayment plan has also not lived up to this promise of delivering debt relief. So in April of this year, the Department of Education announced that it was going to review the income-driven repayment process and count some periods of forbearance and deferment towards loan cancellation. And so this means that periods in which a student loan borrower had up to 12 consecutive months or over 36 cumulative months of forbearance, they can get credit towards being in repayment for those months. So in addition, the department is going to account periods of deferment prior to 2013, as long as it wasn't in school deferment, towards periods of cancellation. Because with income-driven repayment plans, depending on which plan you're in, after 20 or 25 years of payments, you can get your debt canceled. So being able to get additional credits towards payments are going to be really meaningful in order for borrowers to get access to cancellation via income-driven repayment, also getting people additional credits towards public service loan forgiveness. So this is a very important step for helping people get access to additional payment credits for different relief programs. Also, yesterday, the Department of Education announced more information about the IDR account adjustment. And so essentially the department's going to be reviewing all accounts and counting any time of repayment. And again, some periods of forbearances and deferments that I just noted before. So again, 12 consecutive months of forbearance, 36 cumulative months of forbearance, or periods of deferment prior to 2013 that were not in school deferment. And those will be accrued towards periods of cancellation under income-driven repayment plans. And so also one thing that's really important to note, that accrued time also counts towards the PSLF program. So again, that will help additional people get access to cancellation. And again, just really quickly, just other tips about this income-driven repayment plan account adjustment. So again, there are also going to be special steps for people who have loans that are not currently held by the Department of Education. So these again are people who have commercial FFEL and Perkins loans that are not held by the Department of Education. And this is just one more reminder. If you're someone who has commercially held commercially held FFEL loans, or who has Perkins loans that are not currently held by the Department of Education, we're hosting another webinar on November 3rd. That's going to walk through these steps specifically for people who have these loan types. The department is going to begin making these adjustments to accounts for repayment this November, but again, it's going to take a little bit of time. And for everyone, the accounts will all be adjusted in July 2023 for everyone else who won't be counted in the present count starting in November. Okay, so I know that was a lot of information. And I know many of these steps can be a bit confusing. So what we're going to do is we're going to open it up for Q&A, and my colleague Amy is here, and we're going to go through some of these questions together.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kat. I'm just going to give you a break for a minute. I'm going to take the
Thank
first
you.
couple of questions real quick. So first, I just wanted to state that we will be sending a recording out of this webinar tomorrow, hopefully. So if you registered, you'll receive a recording of it. And then I just wanted to tackle the first question because I consulted some of our colleagues while we were on the line. And so the question is about the changes that were recently announced yesterday for July 2023. And they're specifically asking about this hold harmless provision and if there's any indication that this will be retroactive. So I just wanted to clarify some of what Kat said about the IDR account adjustment. So as she mentioned, in April it was announced. Yesterday we received more information, and there were kind of like two prongs to it. One was more information about the IDR account adjustment, and then they also stated that they will be issuing new rules on the PSLF program generally next July. And so those things are, separate but similar, right? And so, the IDR account adjustment, as Kat mentioned, is, a way to get some of your periods of deferment and forbearances to count, as she mentioned, particularly forbearances where you had, up to 12 consecutive months of forbearance or over 36 cumulative months, or if you had any deferments prior to 2013, those will be counted in the IDR account adjustment. They won't be counted under this PSLF waiver, but hopefully next July they'll be rectified under this other thing. There is supposed to be a way that that you can get other periods of forbearance and deferment to also count under these new rules that will come out soon, but we still don't know what that looks like because we haven't seen the final rules. And so I just wanted to flag that because it was a great question, but the truth is that we don't know because the rules haven't come out yet. So hopefully we'll find out more information soon, and we'll be updating our website as we learn more. Okay, thanks, Kat. That was a great presentation. Let's get into some more questions. We're getting some really good ones. Could you talk a little bit about refunds for any voluntary payments made during the COVID-19 payment pause?
That's a really great question. So some people realized that their loans were eligible for the payment pause after they had already made a couple of payments. Either their payments may have been on auto pay, or they just were like, I'm not sure, I'm just gonna keep making my student loan payments. So we do hear stories about people, who had loans that qualified for the payment pause, so they made a couple of payments during the payment pause. You can request refunds for those payments. You have to call your servicer, and you'll have to ask for refunds on payments that you made on your loans that were eligible for the payment pause. One thing to note, two things to note. One, essentially what happens when you request those refunds, essentially that amount is going to be added back to your balance. So if you're someone who's like, well, I'm going to get this amount canceled, I have $10,000 in student debt and I qualify for $10,000 in cancellation. So you might make the judgment for you that you're like, oh, maybe I'll just request that refund. My debt's going to get canceled. What I will say is that is a personal decision that everyone has to make, because that refund amount is going to be added back to your balance. But for some people, it may make more sense, depending on their eligibility for some other relief programs, to request that refund. But just noting that refund amount will be added back to your balance. Two, refunds are not eligible for loans that were consolidated. So if you consolidate, for example, like we know a lot of people consolidate their loans during this period. So like, for example, to access a public service loan forgiveness waiver, some people for various reasons may have consolidated their loans. So that is also one note for some people who request a refund. So they say, wait, why couldn't I get my refund? That might be one reason why. But that's a very, very good question.
And a follow-up to that, does it matter who made the payments for you? What if someone made them on your behalf?
That is a really great question. The payments will go to the person who has the account. So someone might say, my parents made a payment for me during the payment pause, but if it's your name on the account, the refund will go to the account holder, whoever's name is on the account. It's a very good question.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Kat. And I think there is one person who did ask for a refund, and they were denied that refund because their servicer said it was a third-party payment. And so in that scenario, what would you recommend that they do?
That one, we do have FAQs on our Forgive My Student Debt website, specifically on refunds. And so there are different scenarios about like what qualifies for refunds. So definitely check there for more follow-up information. If you go there, you feel like, wait, I am entitled to a refund, there's something wrong, you can always file a complaint at Federal Student Aid. There's a Federal Student Aid ombudsperson. And so you can file a complaint with their office, and hopefully they can help you resolve the issue. And that actually goes for anyone. If you experience an issue, during this process where you feel like your servicer may have given you wrong information, you're having trouble getting in contact with your servicer, please do file a complaint with the ombudsperson at Federal Student Aid.
Thanks, Kat. And the link for that that feedback center for the ombudsperson will be shared tomorrow in the follow-up email as well, so we can look for it there. Okay, so what if someone is having their account currently transferred from Fed Loan to a new servicer? Should they wait to apply for debt cancellation until it's transferred?
That is a really great question. No, apply now. Again, these programs, you can do both. You can access public service loan forgiveness. So if you're previously at Fed Loan, you're going to Mohila, I'm after you're someone who is trying to access public service loan forgiveness, do both. So you can access both programs. So go ahead and submit your application for President Biden's cancellation, and then also make sure you're doing everything you can to get that paperwork in by the waiver deadline.
Amazing. Thanks so much. Okay, we have another question here about loan types. So if people have a mixture of loans, so they have direct, they have FFEL loans, and they have Perkins loans. Could you talk a little bit more about that consolidation issue for PSLF, people seeking PSLF too?
Okay, I'm going to start this by saying this is very situation dependent. So one thing that Amy and I are going to answer these questions to the best of our abilities to give you an understanding of what's going on in the options, but we're not allowed to give you individual advice on your loans, and the decision you make is going to be very dependent on your individual loan situation. So I'll start with public service loan forgiveness. If you're seeking public service loan forgiveness and you have non-direct loans, so you have federal loans that are non-direct. So again, you have either Perkins loans or you have FFEL loans. In order to get public service loan forgiveness credit for those FFEL and Perkins loans, you have to consolidate those loans to get credit. Because you have to have direct loans to be part of this program. And then also during this waiver period, you have to consolidate before October 31st in order to get that retroactive credit on for your loan. So you may have been paying on these FFEL or Perkins loans for a while. So in order to get those other payments to count, you'll ideally want to consolidate during the waiver. So again, that's a calculus you have to make based on like, what are your loan balances in terms of your FFEL or Perkins loans? Do your FFEL or Perkins loans qualify for President Biden's debt cancellation program, right? Because are your Perkins loans commercial FFEL? Are your Perkins loans Ed Health FFEL loans? So I know this is deeply confusing. There's a lot of different scenarios here. So a couple of things I'm going to advise you to do. One, we have information about these loans on our website, forgivemystudentdebt.org. Two, again, it's about what works best for you. One thing to note, public service loan forgiveness cancels the entirety of your remaining balance. So you have to decide. So it's a decision between how much debt do you want canceled, which loans do you want to include in your consolidation. And so I'm sorry, a lot of this is saying it really depends on your loans, but it does. And I don't want to guide you either way. But one thing I will note, if you have commercially held FFEL loans, or if you have Perkins loans that are not owned by the Department of Education, so they're owned by an institution, those are not eligible for President Biden's debt cancellation program. So also, depending on what type of FFEL or Perkins loans you have, that also might guide you in terms of what programs you now have access to. Because if you do have those loans, you may not be able to access President Biden's cancellation program, but you may be able to access PSLF through consolidation. So it's really going to depend on your loan type. Are those loans owned by the Department of Education or not? And then also, what's the balance on those loans? Is it more important for you? And the time in repayment. Are you really close to that 120 payments and the balance is higher? So PSLF will take away all the debt, or is that balance closer to the 10 or 20K in cancellation? So I know it's a very long answer, but it is very situation dependent. And so we'll share those resources so you can read a little bit more about different loan types. I know that was long, but I really wanted to make sure, there are a lot of different scenarios that affect that. Amy, is there anything else you'd want to add there?
Yes, just because I think the same person asked a follow-up question, so I want to address the follow-up question as well. So they asked if you could consolidate into two separate consolidation loans, and have one be eligible for cancellation and one not be eligible for cancellation. And so I want to address this. So yes, you can consolidate your current loans into two separate, distinct consolidation loans. The one that contains the Fell and Perkins loans will not be eligible for cancellation, but a direct consolidation loan made up of only ed-held ed-held federal loans that happens before June 30th, 2023 can be eligible. If you want to start the consolidation process for both at the same time, you'll need to download the consolidation application and complete it manually, like on paper, and mail it to the student loan servicer you'd like to consolidate your loans with. So you'd be, essentially doing one online and one on paper. Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify that because I know this is really confusing and it's a lot of information, and it's a good question. Okay, so thanks, Kat. That was amazing. Okay, we've got a question here about whether people that are currently in school are eligible for either of these programs, either the debt relief or PSLF.
That is a great question. So I'll start with public service loan forgiveness because that's easier. So for PSLF, you have to be working in public service. So technically actually, it depends. So if you are currently in school, you have previously worked in public service, you're in school, you might be working in public service now. So we know a lot of people work while they are in school. You can take advantage of the waiver now, so you can get credit for past periods where you're working in public service. So you're a full-time employee of a qualified employer. Yes, you can get credit. And what you can do essentially is public service loan forgiveness credit does not have to be consecutive. So you can work for 4 or 5 years in public service, get credit for that period of time. You can go to school and say you're not working while you're in school, but then you go work in public service after. You can piece together those periods of time. You can also work for a couple of years in public service, go to school, continue in full-time work for a qualified employer. You can add that time together with your previous employment. So yes, you can benefit in school if you are currently working in public service and you are in school, or if you previously worked for public service and you're in school and you're like, hey, I want to get retroactive credit for the time that I did. You can. Also, one important note is that also full-time for the purposes of public service loan forgiveness is just 30 hours a week. So again, it could be more. So if your employer is like it's 40 hours a week, that's fine. That's what your employer designates as full-time. But say you have 2 part-time jobs, you can piece those together. So your 2 part-time jobs for qualifying employers that add up to 30 hours also counts. That's a really great question about being in school, different options of working. Can you get President Biden's cancellation program while you're in school? If you meet those income requirements, you can, as long as that loan was dispersed by June 30th of this year. So, so that means, if you had previous loans, so for example, whether you're a senior in college or maybe you're, a second-year grad student, if you have loans that were dispersed before June 30th of this year, you can get access to President Biden's cancellation plan. Sorry, got caught on my words.
Thanks, Kat. That's super helpful. We're getting a question about parent plus loans or loans that your parents' name is on, and your parents work in public service. Does that qualify them for PSLF, and how does it work under the waiver too?
That is a great question. I'm going to answer it backwards. Parent plus loans were not included in the PSLF waiver. We will let that go, but like that. So parent plus loans were not included in the waiver. It's something we continue to advocate for because we think parent plus borrowers and parent plus loans should be entitled to this relief, but they were not included in the waiver. However, if you have a parent plus loan, you can consolidate your parent plus loan into a direct loan. So you will have a direct consolidation loan that will then give you access to an income contingent repayment plan. And then you can access public service loan forgiveness under the regular rules. So Parent Plus loans cannot benefit from these relaxed rules of the waiver that exist, but Parent Plus borrowers can benefit from public service loan forgiveness under the regular rules if they consolidate those Parent Plus loans into a direct consolidation loan and then are able to access an income contingent repayment plan. One thing that we will know and we've heard, when you consolidate your loan, you are making a new loan. So you will have a new interest rate. You also maybe have access to different repayment terms. We have sometimes heard that ICR plans, so income contingent repayment plans that are attached to Parent Plus loans, are not as generous as other ones. It just really depends on your scenario. So you also might have to look at, what does your payment look like? How far along are you in repayment? So for example, Parent Plus loans can benefit from President Biden's cancellation plan. So depending on how much you have in loans, you may be able to get a significant portion of your Parent Plus loans canceled through that program. But also, you might say, I'm in public service and I'm going to be working in public service for my career. So it may benefit me for 10 years down the road based on my balance and how far I am in public service to get access to an ICR plan so I can do public service loan forgiveness. Or someone might say, actually, my payments as a Parent Plus borrower are better for me on the current repayment plan I'm in. So again, that is something you will have to work out based on your individual scenarios. But if you do want to know how Parent Plus loans can access public service loan forgiveness, they can. They just cannot benefit from this waiver.
Thanks, Kat.
A lot.
And if people are seeking PSLF, where should they send their forms to, and what is, where can they find, like, what that is? Either a fax number or, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Great question. Okay, so right now, MOHELA is the exclusive servicer for public service loan forgiveness. So if you're submitting forms for public service loan forgiveness, you will want to either fax or mail your forms to MOHELA. You can find the PSLF form either in the PSLF help tool, so you can actually use the PSLF help tool to generate your form, or you can go directly to MOHELA's website and download the form. And there you can also get their information to mail it or fax it. Some people already have MOHELA as their servicer. They've already been transferred. They may have already consolidated. They may have already submitted a PSLF form. So MOHELA is now their servicer. So you may be able just to upload your forms online. If you are not, that is okay. Fax your forms in, mail your forms in, especially if you want to benefit from this waiver that expires on October 31st. Get those forms in as soon as possible, and also get yourself a receipt or some sort of verification that you sent those forms in and you got them before the date. Whether that's making sure it's postmarked and you have a copy of that and a receipt from the post office, whether that's sending it certified mail. If you send a fax, you get some sort of confirmation after your fax, but especially because we're getting close to the waiver deadline and it's all about making sure that you're in the queue, make sure that you also not only submit it as soon as you can, but also do it in a way where you can verify that you submitted it by that date.
Thanks, Kat. We have a question on cancellation. So if someone submitted their cancellation under, the President Biden's debt relief plan, and they did it during the beta period and they didn't get a confirmation email, should that be a point of concern? Is there anything they can do about that?
So if you submitted during the beta period, I'll start with that part, that still counted. So if you submitted during the beta period, that counted. You should have gotten a confirmation email. So I don't know if to tell you to check your email again. You may have maybe entered your email address wrong. One thing that you might be able to do, and again, I know the Department of Education is possibly going to take some time to roll through this process, is just kind of like a wait and see if you hear, if once loans start getting canceled, if you don't hear anything back, you can reach out again to federal student aid in the ombuds office and see. But if you submitted it once, it just may have been that you maybe misspelled your email address. But again, submitting during the beta period, if you press submit, you should be good. But when you submit it, you should have gotten a response. So if you're certain that you're I know my email was right, all my information was right, you might want to follow up with federal student aid in the ombuds office.
Thanks, Kat. That's super helpful. Okay, we're getting a lot of questions about whether people need to consolidate to access PSLF. And so there, people are asking, if I have Nelnet or if I have Sally Mae, does that mean that they're FFEL loans? So how can people find out if they have FFEL loans in the first place?
So a really important thing, and going back to, I'm actually going to share my screen for this. I'm going to go back to the slide that we had. So one thing that, and again, this is something that is a little bit confusing about the student loan servicing. Some servicers service both, you might have a servicer that services, some servicers will service ed held loans, they may service commercial loans. So it's not about your servicer, it's more so about what it says on federal student aid. So for example, like Navient might have some federal loans, they also might have some private loans. So sometimes looking at your servicer might not tell you what type of loan you have. It's about what does your federal student aid data say. So first thing, when you log into studentaid.gov and you get to your loan dashboard, or you go into your managed loan section, you'll be able to see your loans. First of all, the first clue is any loan that is listed under a federal student aid website is a federal loan. So these are your federal loans. Those are, so because I know sometimes we get questions about federal private loans. So anything on federal student aid is a federal loan. And then you say, okay, but does the Department of Education own my FFEL loan, or is it a commercially held FFEL loan? Going back to this breakdown menu. So at the bottom, someone has a FFEL loan, but it's owned by Ed. How do we know? Because it says Department of Education and then the servicer. So the person who owns that loan is the Department of Education. So it's an Ed held FFEL loan. But then we see this person has a Wells Fargo on their federal student loans. I just said, if it's at studentaid.gov, it's a federal student loan. Why is there a private name? If you see a private lender, if you see, for example, like a bank in your federal student aid loans, that's likely a commercially held loan, right? Because who owns a loan? This commercial lender, not the Department of Education. And so you're really going to have to go to the federal student aid website, log into your loan data, and look at your loans. Also, anything that says direct is a direct loan. That's how you know it's a direct loan. It'll say direct loan. But it's a little bit confusing. And again, I know a lot of people are asking this for the purposes of consolidation. So you want to know before October 31st. But for purposes of the income-driven repayment account adjustment, for the purposes of cancellation, we are hosting a webinar just for FFEL borrowers on November 3rd. But at least for the purpose, I will also advise you to go to studentaid.org if you have more questions about consolidation, and we walk through some of those steps there. And we do have anything to add, but I kind of feel like I know it's really deeply confusing, but
no, I think that was great. Yeah. So just, go to studentaid.gov and that's where you're going to find this information out. That's super helpful, Kat. Okay. I think we have time for a couple more quick questions. If people have multiple direct loans, do they need to consolidate to access PSLF?
So again, I'm going to direct you to forgivemystudentdebt.org. And again, this is one of those, we cannot give you personal advice, but we can talk to you about different options that you have. If you have direct loans, those loans qualify for public service loan forgiveness. You do not have to consolidate them. However, if you have multiple direct loans and some are on different timelines for cancellation. So maybe you have some undergraduate direct loans and maybe you have some graduate direct loans, where your undergraduate direct loans are much closer to that 120 payment timeline than your graduate loans. You can consolidate those loans together to create a new direct loan, and during the waiver, only during the waiver period. So this is by October 31st of this year. If you consolidate those loans, they can be forgiven on the timeline as the oldest loan in that consolidation. So you don't have to, but you can. But again, it's just about weighing what options make the most sense for you.
Thanks so much, Kat. So what if someone has been, submitting, forms to certify their employment, but they haven't consolidated. So they have multiple types of loans, and then they also haven't been on IDR. Are they eligible for PSLF under the waiver?
You might repeat. I missed the first part, Amy. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, for sure. So I think that they've been on track, like they claim that they've been on track for forgiveness under PSLF by, I think, submitting PSLF forms, but they've never consolidated. They have multiple loan types, and then they also weren't on an IDR plan. Can they take advantage of the waiver right now?
You likely need to if you want to access public service loan forgiveness. So if you have never been on an income-driven repayment plan, you have anything other than a direct loan, your non-direct loans were likely not on track for public service loan forgiveness prior to this waiver period because they weren't eligible prior to this waiver period. So again, you'll have to, in terms of which loans to consolidate and whether or not you want to do one consolidation or two separate consolidations, however you want to do it. But if you want to access public service loan forgiveness and you have Feller Perkins loans, you need to consolidate those loans by October 31st in order to get credit for those prior payments on those Feller Perkins loans. You also have to submit a PSLF form for any period of employment since October 1st of 2007 where you worked for a qualifying employer. So I know, like, you may, again, have been working for a qualifying employer for that period of time, but if you were not enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan, you have some mix of Feller Perkins loans. Those loans were not on track for public service loan forgiveness. So you're going to want to take advantage of this waiver if you're trying to access public service loan forgiveness. So you want to take those steps before October 31st. Also, if you're also think you're not going to be at 120 payments during this waiver period, you're going to want to enroll in an income-driven repayment plan if you want to continue towards PSLF, because starting in November, once the waiver expires, we'll be going back to regular PSLF rules. So you'll still need to be enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan.
Amazing. Thank you, Kat. I think that's all the time we have for questions tonight. Thank you so much to everyone for joining. I'll pass it back to you, Kat, and thanks again.
Oh, thanks. Thank you so much, Amy. That was really helpful going through the questions. And also thanks so much to everyone here. These were really, really great questions. And I know, like, there was a lot of it depends, but it really is very situation dependent, but also because these are really great questions. I hope we were able to be helpful. We will send out these resources again. We'll send out more information on forgivemystudent.org. We'll send the studentaid.gov website, the links to apply for cancellation. And then for people who might benefit from more information about knowing what kind of FEL loans they have, we will share the information for the FEL webinar. But thank you so much for taking time to join us tonight. Everyone have a great evening. If you are taking advantage of the public service loan forgiveness waiver, please remember to do so before October 31st of this year. But thank you, everyone. Have a great night. Thanks. Bye.